My career sucks.
Sex just isn't the same.
What's my purpose?
Where did this fat come from?
My relationship is killing me.
I'll never be happy.
My debt is piling up. I'll never find love. Why can't I be like other gay guys? Hey guys, it's time to get a grip, stop whining, make a bold move, and do something amazing with your 40-plus gay life. Let's get to the show with your Tell It Like It Is host, Rick Clemons, who does his best to never act like a dick or a diva unless you act like one first.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of 40 Plus Gay Men Gay Talk. You know who I am, Rick Clemons, the host. But one of the things that, I don't know, life is just moving so freaking fast these days. And every day, every moment, every hour, there's something else to be thinking about. It's like the movie Everything Everywhere All at Once. Well, we're living and breathing that right now. And today's guest is actually living and breathing it too, but he hasn't been doing this just for this year. He has had great impact in many ways, writing some amazing books, being part of our LGBTQ history, and now today as a writer for a magazine that most of us know, The Advocate. Every day he is writing stuff about our civil rights and what's happening for us as gay men, and how does he move through this as a gay man who's over 40 himself. He's just barely over 40. He's just 40 plus a day. He's just a little bit over 40. But his name is John Casey, and he is one of the writers for The Advocate magazine. And I am so excited that he's here to share his insights, to put himself into the place of what it's like at his stage of life to be doing this kind of work and having these kind of conversations. And I'm really grateful that John Casey is here. So John, thanks for being here, man. I can't wait to just have this conversation and talk about all the things that you get to write about, and maybe some things you don't like to have to write about. But thanks for being here, buddy.
Oh, well, it's great to see you, Rick, and I'm happy to have this conversation with you as well.
So let's just dive right into it. I mean, you write like a daily column, right? That's what you do for The Advocate?
Well, I worked in PR for 35 years. Worked on Capitol Hill, and then was media relations director for Sears and Kmart, Toys R Us, Macy's, Nielsen. I worked with the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change for 3 years with Mike Bloomberg. When my last PR job was with Nielsen, and at the time I was sort of just working freelance with The Advocate. So when I was laid off at the age of 59, The Advocate brought me on as a senior editor full time, and it's been an exhilarating few years.
Nice.
So basically, I was writing about 3 columns plus feature stories with celebrities and whoever not, and my columns focus a little more on politics. So I speak with a lot of our representatives, governors, former cabinet members, not current cabinet members now. But so when Trump was reelected, my editors turned to me and said, because there was so much news coming so fast and so many things, they said, do you think you'd be able to get a column up every day and sort of track the craziness and the horror that is going on? So since February, like the columns appeared every day, and
Wow.
It's a lot
It's
of
a
work.
lot. I can only imagine because, well, there isn't a day that goes by that there isn't something to talk about, but then it's got to be exhausting. Like you just especially living and breathing as a gay man yourself, and seeing what's going on, and it's hard. I know before we came on and started recording, you said some friends say, well, why don't you just ignore it? And you're like, I can't, right? You just can't.
No, it's impossible because um, I've got to ideate. I've never been able to say that word. Each column, and sometimes
Right.
the columns come like today. I had to write 2 columns because of what happened today with
Mm-hmm.
Trump. But there's every day there's something, so
Yeah.
you can't walk away from it. And yes, as a gay man of a certain age, I turned 60 last year. Um, I lived through the AIDS crisis, have written about marriage equality, clearly,
Mm-hmm.
have been on a lot of panels with the Don't Ask the person who was responsible for overturning Don't Ask, Don't Tell. I mean, I've spoken to every congressperson imaginable. Nancy Pelosi,
Yeah.
said the most important thing she did while Speaker was codifying marriage equality. So all of these issues that we fought for so long are
Mhm.
now under threat. And when I talked to Dr. Fauci, he said he has not seen this level of gay hate since the AIDS crisis. And
Mm.
I agree with them because I'm hearing from our readers who are horrified, and particularly trans members of the trans
Yes.
community who are feeling just isolated, but they have a target on their back. And
Mhm.
so it's been horrifying and frustrating and um, maddening. It's also very hurtful, and so it's very important. It's very crucial to give people hope out there that we're all in this together.
Well, and I think that's the thing is hope right now, which is so ironic that that's so much of what was, being run last year in the election. It's almost like we've been handed the torch and like, you've got to keep this alive. Because if we give up hope, then, and it was really interesting. Just a little over a month ago, my husband and I were on a river cruise through Europe. And we were very concerned, like, okay, do we want to say where we're from? And so we said we were from California, when if somebody said, oh, where are you from? California. And I have to say, we didn't encounter anybody in Europe who was like, oh my gosh, what the hell are y'all thinking? They all kind of get it, right?
Yeah,
And they're like, we don't understand it. We really don't understand it. And it was so refreshing, quite honestly, John, to almost feel that camaraderie as much it was that we were on a gay cruise, and then we got into Amsterdam for Amsterdam Pride. So that was obviously very exhilarating to be like, okay, really celebrating. But that was actually something that being in Amsterdam for Pride was actually probably one of the most moving things I've experienced in many, many years, because it's just so embracing. The entire city embraces it, the pride flags, and the multi LGBTQ pride flags, with the trans flags and everything hanging on churches and hanging
hmm
off of street signs and everything. And then to go, okay, I'm getting on a plane and going home.
right.
It's tough. It's really
Yep,
tough. But then I thought, okay, but how can I show up? How can I continue to show up? And part of it's doing what we're doing right here. I just
exactly.
continue to have these conversations. And so beyond the lovely stuff of what's going on in politics, I think what's important to also talk about during these times is don't let our voices quiet down, even in our own community. I
Right.
think those of us of our age, so you're 60, I'm 62. If we don't, and I came out late in life, so I don't even have the full stories of like, hey, I have the story of hiding in the closet and growing up and being a teen and then coming out later in life. I do have a story of the AIDS epidemic, which many people have heard, that my uncle passed. He was one of the very first ones to pass away from HIV and AIDS. So I
hmm
have some of that, but this is not a time to stop telling those stories and stop passing this on to the younger generation, because I think that's part of what's going to help keep this hope alive. And I'm curious, as you're writing stories, what are some of the things you feel are kind of the pinnacles of like, let's keep that hope a torch alive right now?
Yeah, I think that is a sort of a thread through everyone I talk to, particularly people that are older. And even in the book that I just wrote about marriage equality, I spoke to, Michael McConnell and Jack Baker, who were recognized as the first queer marriage in the United States. And when the Obergefell was passed by SCOTUS, they actively recognized their marriage, which was
Mm,
happened in 1972. But, they said, and this was before Trump, because the book was written last summer, they said, regardless of what happens, regardless if Trump is elected, regardless if the courts overturn it, we have our marriage and nobody can take that away from us. But if
yep,
it happens, the younger generation needs to be ready to fight like we
yep,
did and like
yep.
all of our peers did. And that was the message. Jim and I did a Q&A in New York up for the book launch, the Rizzoli store in Manhattan. And there were a lot of young people there. And, we made it a point, particularly Jim Obergefell, made it a point to say, this is yours now. We're handing this to you. And
Right.
and one final thing, I was on a panel. for the premiere of a MSNBC documentary on Don't Ask, Don't Tell.
Hmm.
And so we had a Q&A after the documentary, and Lieutenant Tom Carpenter was on the panel, and he was primarily responsible for getting Don't Ask, Don't Tell overturned. And a young person raised their hand and said to him, okay, so we overcome the AIDS epidemic, we got marriage equality, we have uh, gays in the military, trans in the military. What's our next frontier? And he said, what do you mean next frontier? We have to keep and fight for what we have now
Yep.
because it's going to take one administration, one president to take it all away, and one Congress and a court to take it away from us.
Mhm.
So the message is that this generation needs to learn, and it sounds like an old wise man saying it, but it's so true. They need to learn our history. They need to learn to understand what happened, and they need to take lessons from it and be ready to fight because that's what it's going to take.
Well, and I also think so. Let's talk about the book a little bit. So the book is Love, the Heroic Stories of Marriage Equality. If these stories do not get told, then they could just slip into, oh, well, I really need it? The thing they don't realize is I remember the days, and I won't go deep in. Well, I don't know a lot of people on this podcast. I had two podcasts at one point, listeners, and for you, John, where I told this story a lot. But I remember the day that I had to be in a hospital with my husband. And this was when we were just domestic partners. Okay. And because of what had happened, there was a lot of suspect. I'm a 6'4" big guy. Okay. And when I brought him in, there was a lot of looking at me like, did you just beat this guy up? What's going on here? Right. Which was not it whatsoever. He had a little bit too much wine to drink and fell flat on his face and broke his nose. And so there was a lot of stuff going on. Right. But I remember panicking like, okay, I didn't have our quote domestic partner papers handy with me. We carried them wherever we went, but we were in our home state of California. I'm like, okay, this shouldn't be an issue, but there was that moment. And
Right.
I don't know the young people can really grasp what that feels like or what that means, you know? Even as I came back from Europe, and this was like, there's a little bit of hyperbole going on here, but I'm like, this podcast is pretty well known. It wouldn't take much for them to stop me from in the airport. And I don't talk about this stuff. I don't go political very often. Okay. But it wouldn't be much for them to pull me out of line and go, oh, you're one of them, because there isn't any hiding. Let's just go there. Of course, maybe it was because I went and walked through Anne Frank house and that just stirred up all sorts of shit for me. But
Yeah.
I think this is why these stories are so important. So as you started to pull together the book and as you do your writing for The Advocate, like it had to have moved you in ways too. Like
Uh,
you had to have just
Tremendously.
gone through tremendous emotions and stuff.
Yeah, I don't know if you've seen it, but a documentary back in the 80s about a couple, and I'm sorry, Mark and Tom,
Mm,
the view from Spring Lake.
mm,
Uh, and it was about this couple, Tom and Mark, Mark Jocelyn, and they were dying of AIDS, and they took care of each other and they had so much love for each other. And this documentary is very raw, and you see them both deteriorate. But one thing that did not deteriorate was that love that they had for each other. And so that's one of the stories in the book. There are happy stories. There are happy
sure.
stories for people one story I always talk about is because Ellen got a lot of flack for in her last couple of years in her talk show, but she went through a whole hell of a lot. And when her show got canceled on ABC and she got her syndicated talk show, she started talking about Portia.
Yep.
And her producers said to her, and so when I talked to her, she told me the story. She said the producers came and said, maybe you should tone it down a little bit about Portia. You don't want to turn
Right.
off the audience again. And she said, no, this is the person I love, and this is the person I'm committed to, and and I have to be honest. I have to be my authentic self. And if she hadn't taken that bold step, I don't know how marriage equality would have been accepted in middle America because Ellen
Hmm.
did so much in in reassuring people that it was okay, and
Right.
that and that two queer people were capable of having a very loving, committed, reliant relationship on each other.
Hmm.
So that's a story in the book. And I think most of the stories, we have stories in the book about people who had to fuck for real estate.
Yep.
What you talked about with uh, in Jim's case, his partner John was dying, and uh, Jim didn't want to push the case anymore in the state of Ohio and get on the Supreme Court, but his attorney brought over a piece of paper and said, "This is John's death certificate, and your name is not on here." And because of that, you won't have anything to do legally with John. So Jim committed to fighting it to the Supreme Court. And so all of this was about love, courage, and fighting. But it all started with love. If there wasn't that deep love for the couples in these books, all the rest of the stuff would have not materialized.
But the thing that's so interesting to me, John, and this is, I mean, this is where I always have this interesting dialogue with people who are not part of our community. They're like, well, why is that so important to tell? Well, you all will go read fantasy books about women and men meeting and falling in love and all of these sort of things. I mean, think about the stories like On Golden Pond. Let's just use that whole thing, you know? I mean, oh, okay, so that's okay to like, oh, isn't that so sweet? But oh, because it's two men or two women, oh, it's not as important. Yes, it is because it's just this is how we live too. The thing is there's not that much, there really isn't that much difference when you think about how two people love, straight or gay, how people cheat, straight or gay, how people get divorced, straight or gay. It's all very similar. You know, how people kind of finally end up kind of becoming roommates towards the end of life. Like you get along, sex drives dry and all this sort of stuff. Okay, I realize for heterosexuals, the guys are always like, yeah, she doesn't want to have sex. I'm like, well, guess what? There's straight gay guys that happens too. So there's not that much difference in any of this. But oh my God, let's throw up the arms and go, oh my gosh, we don't want our kids exposed to all this. My God, what a beautiful thing to expose children to. Like, guess what? They're just like everybody else.
Right.
They're just like everybody else, you know? But then you have ugly people like Kim Davis coming back up saying she's going to go challenge this again in courts. And so far, knock on wood, you know, all the appeals courts have said no, but I just read a news story like now the Supreme Court's going to consider this again. So this to me is why these stories are so important to continue to tell, because the more we can show the world we're just like everybody else. We're not just pride parades with half dressed people and all this sort of stuff, which if the rest of the world would just get over that and just go, it's okay to be sexual beings, the whole planet would be something altogether
Well,
different. But
well, you hit on it. We're just like everybody else, but not so much. But
right.
in a way, we are because what has happened since Ellen went on television and when the portrayal in the media of couples that Cam and Mitchell on Modern Family and all of this.
Right.
So, and then in the neighborhoods around the country, in red and blue neighborhoods, there are queer couples next to straight couples, and these
Yeah.
queer couples are raising kids next to their neighbors, and they're going to the same baseball games and the soccer games, and they're,
Right.
they're going to the same PTA meetings, and they're going to the same community centers. They're
Yep.
so the people who were scared of marriage equality initially see this as no threat now. And I think
Right.
that's why. So there's two things here that polls have consistently showed, at least in the last couple of years, that the GOP Republicans are not so much against marriage equality anymore. I'm not saying they're not out there. They are. Sam Alito and Clarence Thomas are leading the pack. But
Right.
for the most part, people, particularly people who are married, understand the fact that these people are married too. And how can you come along and just tell two people that they're not married anymore?
Mhm.
The other thing, and I think this will be our saving grace at some point, is the next generation is much, much, much more open
Yep.
than we grew up, clearly way more open, but it has progressed to a point where they're open in same-sex relationships in high schools
Yep.
and in college. And it wasn't like that for so long, and it isn't like that for all of the over 50 white men in Congress. So
Right.
their children are the ones who will be changing, not changing society, but more or less making sure that there is equality in society because this is what they've grown up with and they don't consider it such a big deal. So I that's reflected in the book and some of the younger people that we talked to. So these I do think that there is hope for marriage equality to say it, particularly what I said with Nancy Pelosi and her telling me that codifying it was her biggest
Hmm.
thing. Um, I do think that, and I've gotten plenty of calls who saying from people who say, "Hey, my daughter's getting married in December. Should she get married now just in case?" Well, that's up to the person, but
Right.
doesn't mean that they're not going to take away gay marriage and they're not or queer marriage and they're not going to try.
Yes, but don't you think, John? I mean, let's kind of. I mean, I don't want to diminish anything else that's currently happening because I feel like we're kind of a rising tide, especially in the trans space right now. Like, I will not put up with anybody's bullshit around trans people either. I'm just like, you know what? I actually had an interesting conversation with a coworker. Um, I'm not going to go into super detail, but they said, well, I could handle everything but that trans because, God didn't make a mistake. And I remember when I turned and looked that person right in the face and I said, that's right. He didn't. And that's all I said.
Yeah,
And they
yeah,
didn't quite know what to do because I'm like, you kind of just dug yourself a hole there
you did.
because if he didn't make a mistake and this is who that person is, just like I am who I am, then you're going to get into the whole thing. Well, it's a learned behavior. No, trans is not a learned behavior because it's not a behavior to begin with. No more than being gay is a behavior. Now, if you want to say, oh, I want to experiment with sex, that's a behavior. That's a behavioral thing. Okay.
Right.
And so I find it so interesting that if we continue to band together and go, okay, we're gonna fight these fights, it's kind of sad to me that they'll go, well, okay, gay marriage, that's okay, but all this other stuff, no. And we can see it. We can see it in all the laws that are trying to be passed and things that are being
Yep.
taken away. They're trying their best to quote make us, second class citizens, maybe even third class citizens. But I think we will reach a point. Hopefully, my hope is where the young people just go, enough is enough, because this is how we see the world and you all are just so out of touch. And I have a friend slash coworker who says, we're not coming after gay marriage. I'm like, well, you're coming after everything else, so don't tell me you're going to just this one little thing you're going to let slide by, because everything else around my community you want to treat us like, the gay marriage is not going to be the one thing you let just sit and go, but we let you have this, we let you have this. So I think this is
Right.
why we're to the place of fighting. So I'm curious for
Well,
you, because you're in a very interesting space where you're doing this on a daily basis. If you were to say, here's what I feel like, and I hate to do this to you, John,
that's
here's like one
okay.
of the most important things on the agenda right now. What do you think it is? Because there's so many things.
Well, I think it's our democracy. It's and clearly every day it's being chipped away. In fact, I'm convinced that we've already slid into an autocracy.
Yeah, I
It's
agree.
just everything is just starting to catch up, and it will. Um, but it all starts there because if you don't have the freedom, if you don't have democracy, then everything else sort of deteriorates. So
Mm-hmm.
at the pinnacle is democracy. And then I would also probably say that marginalized communities, what's being done to them. I mean, the military takeover in DC is blatantly racist because DC has the largest amount of black and brown people
Mm-hmm.
in any city in the country.
Yep.
And they also have a fair amount of women. We all know how Trump feels about women. But marginalized communities are really, really being hurt, particularly our community and
Yep.
with the trans community. And I think that's really going to really go tenfold is when the big, beautiful bill starts to take effect because so many people, poor people, are going to lose their health insurance. They're going to lose
Yep.
access to health care. They're going to lose Medicaid. they're going to lose all the and even if it's not them personally, it's going to be their aunt or their mother or their grandfather, and so these things are going to affect people intimately,
Mm-hmm.
not just financially, but
Mm-hmm.
intimately. I do think one of the other things we have to worry about is public health. And I talked to, Dr. Michael Osterholm, who was Joe Biden's medical advisor, and a few other people. And what Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is doing to vaccines, taking the mRNA vaccine off. These were, when I talked to Dr. Fauci, these were going to be life-saving drugs for future um, catastrophes, future
Yep.
plagues, because they were so easy to program and quick. They can be quickly manufactured. I think public health is going to deteriorate. It's a perfect storm. Michael
Yes, it is.
Osterman, it is Robert F. Kennedy taking away the vaccine committees, taking away the vaccine research, taking away mRNA, taking away research and medical research in institutions of higher learning. And then you have the Medicaid stuff disappearing. You have rural hospitals disappearing. There's access to doctors are disappearing. All of this is going to be a major affront to public health. And so I think that is a worry. And then I think, I talked to Congressman Jamie Raskin. He's a constitutional lawyer. So his specialty is in Constitution. And I asked him, what keeps you up at night? And he said, World War III. He's
Mm.
afraid that Trump is going, the world is on tenterhooks to begin with, and it
Right.
always has been. But all it takes is somebody with this immense power, which Trump has now accumulated, particularly in the way he's instituted the tariffs, um, that all it's going to take is one person to just upend what
Yep.
is, and I think we're seeing that. I think we're
Yeah.
seeing that we're going to be losing our compatriots and that's a wrong word, but
I know,
our
but I get what
allies,
you're saying. Yep.
the
Allies for
allies
sure.
in NATO and the friends we've had in Canada and Mexico. So this is a domino effect, and
Hmm.
it's going to keep happening. We have 3 more years left, so it's hard to tell. I don't even think somebody who could call themselves a telepathic, somebody who could see in the future, could even be able to
Right.
guess what will be a year from now.
Yeah. But I think this is where it also affects our community. I mean, let's just be real.
Bingo.
Even if you take away all the Medicare, Medicaid, all that, there are a tremendous amount. Let's just be honest. Everybody thinks, oh, the gays and lesbians, they have money because they didn't want to have kids. No, that's so
No,
this
and
affects our community really in a deep way. And because a lot of our community depends on that stuff, especially as we age as elder gays and lesbians,
right,
right?
right.
A lot
And
of us don't have those spouses who have pensions and all these things that a normal quote heterosexual couple. And I'm not saying there aren't singles in the heterosexual world that aren't going to be faced with this too, because they're going to hit the same thing, like, okay, there was nowhere else to turn to on this. But I think this is where, as gay men, we need to really be paying attention. And yes, I'm one of those, like, I don't want to watch the news, I don't want to really listen to the news. I get in once a day, kind of scroll through and, like, okay, I think I know what's going on, except I didn't know there was wildfires right outside my own hometown right now. But I'm like, okay. But I think this is where we owe it to ourselves to, as much as it takes us down, to find a way to be able to absorb it without it getting into our DNA and taking us into depression and everything, which can be really easy to happen, but staying aware. Like,
right.
here's the awareness levels that we need to be at.
Yeah,
So,
the other thing you have to consider too is, somebody like Pete Hegseth, for example, has targeted trans people. Once he gets trans people out of the military, if he's successful in that, then he's going to come after us.
mm-hmm.
And
Yep.
then, this is reflective in society.
Yep.
That the hate speech that has grown it's clear that the data supporting it has resulted in rising hate crimes around the
Yep.
country. And it's
Yep.
because the voices of hate give rise to violence, and
Mm-hmm.
that's occurring too. And so we do have to be vigilant in more ways than one.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I'm so glad you took time out of your day to come talk to us. Again, the name of the book, you want to shout that out so people want to get their hands on it?
Sure. It's called Love, the Heroic Stories of Marriage Equality. And it's published by Rizzoli, but you can get it on Amazon
Anywhere.
and anywhere that sells a
Mhm.
book.
And if you want to follow John, just find him on The Advocate. You can't miss him there. It's such a vital piece of daily work you're doing. I don't know how you keep up, man, because I used to write for Huffington Post and a couple of those. I'm like, oh, I
I
got to
thought
do
your,
another article.
when did you do that? I thought your name looked familiar.
Like from 2009 to 15,
What was
16,
your
something.
what was your beat?
It was just the gay section of Huffington Post, yeah. And then
Uh,
I wrote for Your Tango as well. That was another one that I wrote for a lot, and I enjoyed it. But man, it was like, okay, now I got another story to do. I got another.
well, I
There's
was
times you just go, okay, I don't know. But
well, I'm a fan of your podcast, but I was like, somewhere else the sky has come into my life,
yes,
and it's
yeah,
because I used to read you on the Huffington
yeah,
Post.
yeah,
So
yeah, yeah. So, well, I'm so glad to finally get to meet you, and I've been following you as well. And thanks for sharing who you are. And again, guys, if you want to follow, just get on Advocate. John Casey's the name you can follow. Do you have an Instagram account or anything, John, that they
yes,
could follow as well?
I have an Instagram and LinkedIn. So
Okay,
go
good.
ahead and do both. And
Okay,
I'm happy
awesome.
to come back and talk to you anytime, Rick.
Oh, I would love that, John. So again, and guys, keep out there, keep keeping the faith, keep that hope alive, and realize that without us, there will be no us. So we need to keep ourselves out there present and letting people know we're not going anywhere. And also, guys, don't forget, if you want to join the monthly call, those are the third month of every month. We've got a couple coming up, and we'd love to have you there. Just go to the website. You can go to gaymenschat.com and find all that out. But again, John, thank you so much for being here, being part of my world and sharing yourself. I so appreciate you, man.
Thank you, Rick.
That's a wrap for 40 Plus. Gay men, gay talk, where size doesn't matter. We drop our bullshit, get over our screwed up fears, make bold moves, and live life without apologies. Don't forget to join us on Facebook at 40 Plus, Gay Men, Gay Talk, where the conversations continue.